Whoever attacks the prevailing religious opinion of his time must in his turn expect to be attacked. We haven't yet outgrown the barbarism that argument can be answered by personal abuse. The religious world of today has not yet outgrown the belief that you have to answer every argument by not showing it is bad, but by showing that the man who makes it is bad. It makes no difference whether the maker of an arithmetic turned out to have been a rascal or not. We still have to believe that 10 times 10 is 100. I expect to be attacked, and I have not been disappointed. I have always supposed that religion taught men to love their enemies, or at least treat their friends decently, but I never knew of a minister who ever loved me, or could ever forgive me. In return, I only want them to act so I won't have to forgive them. I don't pretend to love my enemies. I find it hard work to love my friends, and if I have the same feeling towards my enemies as towards my friend, I have no humanity in me. I deny that any man is under obligations to love his enemies. I believe in returning good for good, for evil Confucius doctrine, exact justice without admixture of revenge. All I ask of the Christian world is to simply tell the truth, and that is a good deal more than they will ever do. There was a time when falsehood from the pulpit smote like a sword, and now it has become almost an innocent amusement. Lying is now the last weapon left in the arsenal of theology. They say I am in favor of too much liberty, but I am only in favor of justice, liberty, and society. You cannot make men good by slavery. There is no regeneration in the chain. You can't make a man honest by tying his hands behind him. Good laws don't make good people, but good people make good laws. There was no reformation in force or fear. You might scare a man so that he might not do a thing, but you could not scare him so that he would not want to do it. All the laws in the world won't change the disposition of a human being. It has been charged against me by the Reverend Joseph Crook that I am in favor of dissemination of obscene literature. When Cook made that statement, he wrote across his reputation the word liar. When he said that, he knew he lied willfully and malignantly. And every man who repeated that slander knew he had lied, and every religious editor who put it into his paper knew that he lied. With one or two exceptions, I never knew an honest editor of a religious paper. If truth was red hot, it would never scorch him. I am simply in favor of allowing the literature of science the same rights in the mails of the United States as is allowed in the literature of superstition. I despise beyond the power of speech the man who would read or circulate a book, the tendency of which would be to leave a stain on the fairest of all flowers, the heart of a girl or boy. The Reverend Joseph Cook is said to have spent a year in an insane asylum. This is the way I account for this lie of his. His friends made two mistakes. They were a little too slow in putting him in, and a little too fast in letting him out. If any Orthodox clergyman will read to his congregation certain passages in the Bible that I select, I will pay him 100 in gold. There wouldn't be a lady left in the church, and if a man stayed, it would be to chastise the man for insulting the women. I believe in keeping the family pure, and men who are trying to blacken my reputation are not fit to blacken my shoes. It is one of my arguments against a personal God that such men exist. An infinitely wise God would never have produced them. Nearly everybody is afraid to express his thoughts on the subject of God. They imagine there is some kind of being up yonder who would be filled with wrath at some poor human being who dared express his best thoughts. Can you injure this God? No. Why? Because he is infinite. What do you mean by that? Conditionless. How can you injure a man? Only by changing his condition. If there is a God who is conditionless, you can't possibly change conditions because he hasn't any. Therefore, you can't interfere with him in any way. You can't commit a single sin against him. Therefore, you need have no fear. I can say my say fearlessly. So can every other man. For all these hundreds of years, the clergy has been telling people there is such a crime as blasphemy. There is a personal God up there that made the world. He made you, and you ought to go down on your knees and thank him. Thank him for what? Ought the beggar to thank him who was starving in the midst of plenty? Ought the man who was born under some despotism, and has had to toil hard year after year, yet never sees a decent dress on his wife, nor takes a decent meal? Ought the woman whose husband is a drunkard? Ought the poor invalid who was a slave to some hereditary disease? Ought the one who was born deformed? Ought the millions of poor slaves to thank God? Let us be honest. Ought the black man to thank the God for having made the white man mean enough to hate him because he was black? Ought the poor widow who lives in misery and destitution? Ought the man who was forced to enter in the army of a despot against his will? If you will credit God with everything that is good, let's keep a double set of books so as to keep the account straight on the other side, and debit him with everything that is bad. Suppose we go to some strange island of 100,000 inhabitants. We see a gentleman there who tells us about it. Who do you have for your governor? An infinite being. Does he know everything? Everything. Can he do just what he wants? Exactly. After a little while, I see some men dragging a woman along, tearing a child from her, and the poor woman shrieking in agony. I ask, what are they going to do with that woman? They are going to burn her. Does your governor know about it? Oh, yes, he knew of it the moment they intended to do it. Could he have stopped it? Perfectly easily. Is that woman an enemy of his? Oh, no, it is just the opposite. She prays and thanks him morning, noon, and night, and she will do so in the midst of flame and smoke. Are the men who are burning her his friends? No, they are his enemies. Such is the God that governs this world. Suppose the next man who tried to commit murder should drop dead. Suppose the hand of the next man who raised it to strike his wife a cruel blow should fall paralyzed at his side. Suppose the next man who tried to commit any crime should fall to the ground. How many crimes do you think would be committed when that state of things came round generally? Not many. Is it possible that any intelligent person believes there is some being who interferes in the affairs of this world? I read extracts from 2 sermons the other day. How I came to do it I don't know, but I did it. One was a sermon by the Reverend Mr. Mooney on the subject of prayer, urging upon people to pray that portion of the Lord's Prayer, "Thy will be done," as if it was necessary to coax God to have his own way. He says in his sermon, there was a poor woman who had an exceedingly sick child. The doctor told her it couldn't live. "Oh," said the mother, "I can't consent that my poor darling child should die." She prayed to God such a prayer that it was almost a prayer of rebellion. "I can't spare my child, oh God, spare it on me." She didn't want God's will done, but her own. God heard her prayer and saved the child, but when it got well, it was an idiot, and the poor woman had to watch over and take care of that child 15 long years. The moral of the story is how much better it would have been to let God kill the child when he wanted to. Is there anyone here who believes in such a God as that? Yes, this doctrine is preached from almost every pulpit in the world. I read it in another sermon by the Reverend DeWitt Talmage about dreams, that God appears to men in dreams. Just think of it. An infinite being catching some poor fellow asleep and going at him. According to the story, there was a poor old woman that had the rheumatism, and another woman nearly as poor that hadn't got the rheumatism. And the woman without the rheumatism used to wait on the other and take care of her. All at once, the one without the rheumatism died. Then the other lady said, "Where am I going to get anything to eat?" That night, God left his throne, after having given directions about winding up the sun and the moon, and came to this old woman in a dream. He took her out of her house, and carried her where there was a large mountain of bread on the right hand, and a large mountain of butter on the left hand. When I read that, I said to myself, what a good place to start a political party. God said to the poor woman, "All these provisions belong to your father. Do you think he will allow one of his children to starve?" And the reverend gentleman says that the next day, a man in some mysterious way was moved to the old lady. Seeing her destitution, he took pity of her, and took care of her till she died. Is it possible there's a being who interferes in the affairs of this world, and interfered to feed that poor woman? Then why don't he feed hundreds and thousands of others? Why show her mountains of bread and butter, and allow millions to die of famine in other parts of the world? Look at that terrible famine in China, which might have been prevented by a slight change in the wind. If God would have changed the wind, that would have changed the direction of the clouds, and they would have gone all over that parched up district and emptied themselves upon it, and there would have been plenty. But God didn't change the wind, and the clouds emptied into the sea. What would you think of a gardener who had an immense barrel of water in the garden, and when the ground got parched and the flowers and the fruit were dying from the drought, took the pail of water from the barrel and carried it round the garden and emptied it into the barrel again? This is what God did to China when he allowed the clouds to empty themselves into the sea. Has God ever interfered in the affairs of this world? This is an all-important question, for upon it depends the question of whether we have any human right at all. If there is an infinite being who does everything to suit himself, we have no rights and can't have any. Let him go on and do what he likes. We needn't trouble ourselves any more because we can't alter his plans. No one ever interfered to prevent slavery in any country, at any time or any place. No one ever interfered to prevent any other form of human oppression or wrong. Hence you can't start a religion without a miracle. You must show that the facts of nature have been changed. Hence, they have always proved that point. There is a God who interferes in the affairs of this world. But admit that he is infinite, and it matters not whether you pray to him or not. It makes no difference what you do. It's like trying to lift yourself up by the straps of your boots. It's no good, but you get good exercise from it. So it is with prayer. Let me go back to the time when society was first formed, a long time ago. Blackstone and Locke have always taken the ground that society first was formed by contract. I don't believe it. They write as though they suppose the trees form groves by contract, that the animals form themselves into flocks and herds by agreement. How did men originally come to act together? By contract? No, by necessity. Yes, when men first formed themselves into society, they were not the equal of beasts. The latter was superior. That was the reason men first worshipped beasts. No man ever worshipped anything that he didn't believe was his superior. Let us get to the foundation of this idea of worship. When man first looked upon the lion, he saw an animal that had greater strength than he. When he saw the serpent climb without hands and run without feet and live apparently without food, it struck him with awe. He saw the powerful eagle flying against the storms and gazing at the blazing sun. He saw something that was superior to him, and he was filled with wonder and admiration. The result was that he began to worship beasts and make gods out of lions and snakes and eagles. The story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden and the brazen serpent of the wilderness are but reminiscences of old serpent worship. Almost all kinds of animals were deified. The old Jews themselves, including Moses, worshipped Jehovah in the form of a bull. That accounts for the horns at the altar. They not only worshipped that god, but many others. Even in the time of Solomon and Jeroboam, there were 30 temples in which other gods were worshipped besides Jehovah. After men found out that one animal by itself was not their superior, they began to make gods composed of several animals. They took the lion for strength, the eagle for swiftness, the serpent for cunning or long life, making together an animal that could not be killed. Take the Mexican Indians. What is their name for a god? Stone Spirit, one who wore an armor of stone. Where did they get that idea from? The armadillo, who could not be pierced by their arrows, something you could not kill. I want to convince you all, as we go along, that we manufacture these gods ourselves, and every one of them is a poor job. After men got through worshipping beasts, simple and compounded, they began worshipping man, the beautiful qualities in man as well as the good ones. Gods were first beasts, then man. Right here, let me tell you, there's not a person in this house who can think of God except in the form of a man. Why? Because that is the highest intellectual form you're acquainted with. You can't think of God on 4 legs or as a woman. Why? Because man made all the religions. We haven't yet become civilized enough to worship a principle. If we worship God as a woman, I should be more apt to join some church myself. Now, having traced the origin of God, the next question: does this God interfere in the affairs of this world? For upon this depends the great question of human rights. The savage has always believed it. When his poor hut was blown down, he thought God was mad at him, or with one of his neighbors. Just think of the infinite maker of every shining world getting mad at the poor savage and pulling up his house. I tell you, this world has been mightily abused, and it almost makes one die of pity to read its religious history. The priest said, "You will have to employ me. I have influence. I am a lobbyist in the legislature of heaven." The priest said to the poor fellow, "Divide with me." That was the commencement of slavery. The next point was to teach that God would hold the whole community responsible for what one man did. There could not be a meaner principle. Then they taught that God wanted to be worshipped, and a fine temple must be built to worship him in. That an infinite being likes to see men go down on their knees and thank him. How gratifying it would be to us to have the millions of little animalcules everywhere go down on their knees to us. Since God demanded worship, there must be some order to it, and certain gentlemen knew just what this being wanted, just what kind of ceremony would suit him, hence the church and all these religious mummeries. All at once some terrible calamity would befall the community. What then? Somebody had insulted God. He had not brought a sacrifice. He had not killed his sheep. Let us hunt him up and kill him. Then our God will be appeased. They went so far as to say without the shedding of blood there was no remission of sins, and they would sacrifice to God the one they loved best. Think of that old man in Pocasset, Massachusetts, who read the Old and New Testament so carefully and believingly that he killed his own child as a sacrifice. And no wonder either if he believed those books. God told Abraham to take his son Isaac and kill him. Abraham started to do the inhuman work and was just going to kill his son when God fortunately stopped him in the nick of time. Jephthah made a bargain with God that if God would let him whip his enemies, he would sacrifice the first thing that greeted him on his return. The prayer was granted, and as he neared his home, a company of girls met him, and at their head was his own daughter. He sacrificed her. That man in Massachusetts, having read these beautiful stories, infamous lies, I call them, made up his mind God wanted him to sacrifice one of his children. If God told me to sacrifice one of my children to him, I wouldn't do it though I knew it was God who demanded it. I would say to him, dash me to the lowest depths of hell. I will go there rather than have the blood of my darling on my hands. This man only followed the examples of a God who sacrificed his own son. I say there never was and never will be a God who demands a sacrifice. Could it make an infinite being any better to give up to him that which you love the most? It is simply insanity. The next step taken by the priest was to teach not only that all religion came from God, but that all political power came from God also, that God had made priests to tell people what to believe and kings to tell them what to do. Only a little while back we find kings claiming they reign by divine right. The Bible says, "Be subject to the powers that be, because they are ordained of God." I deny it. If that doctrine had been carried out, there never would have been any revolution in the world from that day to this. All political power comes from God, said the priest. Consequently, if a man said a word against the king or one of his nobles, he was a traitor to the divine being. The altar and the throne fitted each other like the upper and lower jaw of a hyena, and crushed liberty underfoot. Just as long as men believed political power came from God, they were cringing slaves, and the men who taught such doctrine themselves were hypocrites and tyrants. After a while, people began to think that all political power didn't always come from God. The kings, however, kept taking a little more and a little more, and the people grew more and more wretched and downtrodden, until finally they said, "Power does not come from God." And in 1776, our fathers retired God from politics altogether. They said, "Power comes only from the consent of the governed, and not from God." The true source of power is the will of the people. We are not going above the clouds to look for authority. Did our fathers understand religious liberty? Only 2 or 3 of them. How, then, did they leave God out of the Constitution? The colonies were not in favor of religious liberty. The Pilgrim Fathers were not. They left England for conscience sake. They wanted the right to worship God as they thought best and went over to Holland. There they had to worship God according to their conscience, but other people had the right to worship God in a different way and to preach different doctrines, so the Pilgrims came over here. They left England to escape persecution and left Holland to get away from religious liberty. When they got over, they were ready to kill those who differed from them. How, then, did they come to frame a constitution without God? Because no 3 states had the same religion. They could not agree upon which church should be bride of the state, or which church should be married to the Constitution. So each church, rather than see some other church bride of the state, was willing to see the state a bachelor, and God was left out in the cold. It was all owing to the meanness and jealousy of those churches that we got a constitution with no superstition in it. There are some lunatics even nowadays who want to put God in the Constitution. I am opposed to it. If you get one infinite being in, there'll be no room for other folks, and I don't think God himself would feel much complimented by being put there. These men had no idea of human rights, for they believed that God would hold the community responsible for the deeds of some individual. When that train of cars went down recently in Scotland, the pulpit resounded with talk about divine judgment for violating the Sabbath. One of the passengers was a sailor coming home to see his widowed mother, to take care of her in her declining years. Just think of God killing that man for crossing a bridge on Sunday. Imagine some rosy-cheeked little boys in a boat on Sunday fishing. At the end of their lines are fashioned pinhooks, and an infinite being descends and keels over their boat because it is Sunday. Our fathers had no idea of religious liberty in their times, and their descendants today have not. In many states, a man cannot testify in a court of justice because he doesn't believe in their God. If my wife and children were killed before my eyes, and I took their corpse into the court, I would not be permitted to say who did it. This is not only depriving me of testimony, but it deprives the state of testimony. I cannot believe in a personal God in a land where there is injustice, where innocence is not safe, where honest men toil and rogues ride in carriages, where hypocrisy is crowned and sincerity degraded. I cannot conceive of this world being governed by an infinite being. If any good must be done, man has got to do it. We must depend upon ourselves. We mustn't consider the lilies of the field. We must sow the field and reap the harvest and the crops ourselves. I want to show you the extent to which the church has gone. Religion never relied upon argument. Protestantism never gained an inch of soil except at the mouth of the cannon or the point of the sword. The smallest island in the seas has never been taken by Catholic or Protestant except by the point of the bayonet. Religion of love has always been shot into nations. Who are the most warlike nations in the world today? Christian nations. Who invent the best guns and greatest cannons for killing human beings? Christian nations. Does any one of you wish to be a millionaire or famous for the rest of his life? Then invent a cannon that will blow more Christian brains into froth than the best cannon will, and your fortune will be made. Your name will become famous. In the last 8 years, the national debts of Christendom have increased to over $6 billion. What Catholic nation is the most orthodox today? Spain. And is there any meaner nation? What next? Portugal. What next? Italy. The land covered with brigands, every one of which carries an image of the Virgin or some favorite saint, who crosses himself with holy water in a cathedral before he starts on his brigand work. What next? Ireland. Poor Ireland, crushed beneath the heels of oppression for hundreds of years. Why? Simply because its oppressor was of a different religion. It is religion which has reduced Spain to a guitar. Italy to a hand organ, and Ireland to exile. What is the most orthodox Protestant nation today? Scotland. And in 1877, there were 12,000 women arrested in Glasgow for drunkenness. What nation is the most prosperous country in Europe today? France. There's a Christian nation, Russia. Our president complimented the Tsar that God was watching over the sparrow and watched over his infamous life and saved him from assassination. Go with me to Siberia. Who are the poor creatures drawing the wagons on their hands and knees? Girls of 16, 17, and 18, and 20. What are they there for? Haven't said a word in favor of human liberty. That is all. Do you blame the lovers or the parents of these girls if they endeavor to send a bullet to the heart of the Tsar who allows such brutality? In such a case, my sympathies are closed around the point of a dagger. I want to show you a little picture I got from an old church where Shakespeare was buried. Given a description of Judgment Day, about 50 fellows were coming out of their graves, and little devils were grabbing them by the heels. There was a great cauldron with about 20 fellows in it. The devils were pouring boiling pitch into it. 5 or 6 were hung upon hooks by their tongues. Right in the corner there were some saints. I never saw such a self-satisfied grin on any person's face in my life. They seemed to say to the sinner, "How now, Mr. Smarty? What did I tell you?" I believe there are lots of clergymen in the United States willing to die to see men in hell. I once read a little poem translated from the Persian. A good man who worked 7 long years in acts of charity and then mounted the steps of heaven knocked at the gate. "Who was there?" cried a voice. "Thy slave, O God." No answer. He toiled again 7 long years in acts of charity and piety. Again ascended to the gate and knocked. "Who was there?" "Thy servant, O God." No answer. Again he went back and toiled 7 more years, and then mounted the gates of heaven and knocked. "Who is there?" "Thyself, O God." The gate opened and he entered heaven. The next great thing for us to do is to get God out of religion. So long as God is in religion, there will be popes, cardinals, priests, clergy, cathedrals, and churches, and all these religious creeds coming down from high for men to swallow. There'll be no religious liberty until man is himself the source of religion, and humanity takes the place of superstition. I want to take the D from the name of devil so as to make it evil. I want to stick an O in the word God so that it will be the supreme good that men worship in the future. When we do that, there will be perfect religious liberty, and not till then. Hell is rapidly cooling off, and a man will have to take his overcoat with him. The liberty of man is asserting itself and would eventually become the religion of the world.